Hello, Beth Tikkun and the world. Welcome to our study of the book of Yehoshua, or Joshua. This week, we're in chapter 12. So as we wrap up the first half of Joshua, we review an inventory of every place and king defeated by Israel under the leadership of Moses and Joshua. Before the simple list of kings on the western side of the Jordan, defeated under Joshua's leadership, we're given more lengthy descriptions of the two kings on the eastern side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, who were defeated under Moses' leadership. Moses' victory over Sihon and Og was a greater accomplishment, it can be said, than Joshua's victory over the 31 Canaanite kings, because Sihon and Og ruled stronger and more powerful kingdoms which exercised political control over the 31 kings of Canaan. So it's a shorter passage than we've had recently, and it's a passage that's likely glossed over because it has a long list in it. But it is rich with meaning, as we'll see. So let's open our Bible and jump to Joshua 12. So let's dive in. And again, this week I'll be reading from the Tree of Life version. Mostly reading from the Tree of Life version, but there is a resource that I've created using a different version that I didn't write down. Maybe we'll get that to you later if you request it. So, Joshua 12, verse 1. Now these are the kings of the land whom Bnei Israel defeated and possessed their land beyond the Jordan toward the sunrise, from the valley of the Arnon to Mount Hermon, and all the Arabah eastward. King Sihon of the Amorites, who lived in Heshbon and ruled from Aroer, which is on the edge of the valley of the Arnon, and the middle of the valley, and half Gilead, even up to the Jabbok River, the border of Ammon, and the Arabah up to the Sea of Chinnerot, eastward, and as far as the Sea of the Arabah, the Salt Sea, eastward the way to Beth ha-Yeshimot, and on the south, at the foot of the slopes of Pisgah. Also the territory of King Og of Bashan, one of the remnant of the Rephaim, who lived at Ashtaroth and at Edrei, and ruled over Mount Hermon and Salcah and all Bashan, as far as the border of the Geshuri and the Ma'akathi, and half of Gilead, as far as the border of King Sihon of Heshbon. So I'm just going to stop there for a second. Verses 2 through 5 go into greater detail in describing kings Sihon and Og, who were defeated under Moses' leadership previously in the Torah. And I want to go over something that Grant had taught us years ago and had repeated many times, and which I put into a resource here called the Sihon and Og, the Enemies of Fruitfulness. And this will be included in the Thursday update links there and on our website as well for you to download. But it basically goes through these 4 verses and calls out some of the important words, the names of the kingdoms, of the places in these kingdoms, and we're making a connection here between 2 of the most important victories we are to achieve before we have an ultimate victory and an inheritance in the land. If Joshua is about victory and inheritance, these 2 victories here against Sihon and Og are instrumental spiritually in our lives. So Sihon is considered to be, the battle against Sihon is considered to be the battle against human reasoning. Now, when I say human reasoning, I don't mean thinking. I don't mean thought. I mean human reasoning. Abandoning faith and going purely on your own understanding, leaning on your own understanding. And so that's what this battle here is representing. The battle against Og represents the battle against the fleshly appetite, comfort, things like that. And when we replace that with obedience to Torah, then we will have a victory there as well. So human reasoning instead of faith is Sihon. fleshly appetites instead of obedience is Og. So I'm going to go through these 4 verses now and call some attention to some of the Hebrew words here and what they mean. So right off the bat, we start with Sihon. Sihon means swept away. It could be said that Sihon was we know he was a powerful king. He had a powerful kingdom, and he could just sweep away his enemies. He was king of the Amori, or the Amorites. The word here for Amori is related to the word talking. Not necessarily speaking, but talking, kind of like chatter, empty talk. So he was the king of talkers, who lived in Heshbon. Now, Heshbon is Hebrew for reasoning, and we can say that that's human reasoning. He ruled from Aroer, which means naked, okay, which is on the bank of the stream of Arnon. Arnon here, the Hebrew word, means rushing or roaring. And you can say that sometimes our human reasoning is so overwhelming and powerful that it sweeps away our faith sometimes. In the midst of the stream and half of the Gilead. So the Gilead, a Hebrew word here meaning rough or stony, and up to the Yabok, the stream that was the border of Ammon. Yabok means empty out, an emptying out. The stream that was the border of Ammon. Ammon is a word that means kindred. It also shares the root of the word emunah, or faith. So there is a correlation there. There is the relationship. It is a kindred to faith, but it is not faith. It may even be misconstrued as faith, but human reasoning isn't faith. Moving on. And the Arabah, up to the sea of Chinnerot. Chinnerot here is a word for heart. A lot of times when we use human reasoning, we may be influenced by how we feel about it. Our heart, where the seat of our emotions is. The Sea of Chinnerot, and on the east, and up to the Arabah Sea, the Sea of Salt. The Sea of Salt, of course, is the Dead Sea, a sea where no life can be sustained. It is the Dead Sea. And that is on the east, by way of Beit HaYasimot. Beit HaYasimot means house of destruction, or house of desolation. And from the south, below the foothills of Pisgah. Pisgah is the Hebrew for fragment. And you can say that in human reasoning, there is always a fragment of truth. The enemy, we know, uses his superior knowledge of truth in order to conceal much of it in a package that seems very much like truth, but is not, is a deception. So here we have, in this description of Sihon, we have all of these words, all of these meanings here that relate to human reasoning and how human reasoning without faith is so dangerous. Swept away, talkers. Human reasoning, people like to talk a lot who are relying on their human reasoning. They're naked. They're really exposed for what they are. A rushing and roaring. It's a powerful, overwhelming force. It's rough and stony. And only half of Gilead here. The other half of Gilead we see is in the kingdom of Bashan with King Og. Yabok, the river, an emptying out. It's empty. It does not have substance. It is akin to faith, but it is not faith. It's something other than faith. The heart is relied on. It's the Dead Sea where life cannot be sustained. A house of destruction. It's a house that is easily torn down, right? And then Pisgah fragment, or a fragment of truth. So all this is buried here underneath the surface of the Hebrew for the description of Sihon. Moving on to Og now, in verses 4 and 5. And the border of Og, Og is translated as gigantic. And if we look back in the Torah, the only other explanation of Og or description of Og is a description of the size of his bed. It's a massive, huge bed. So he was an enormous, enormous person. King of Bashan. Bashan, the Hebrew here is soft or sandy soil. So he's big and soft, right? How do you get big and soft? You get big and soft by eating a lot and not doing much, right? Just kind of being enticed by comfort and by satisfying the fleshly appetite. Of the remnant of the Rephaim, of the giants, who lived in Ashtaroth and in Edrei. Ashtaroth is a fertility cult. They worshipped the goddess Astartes, which was a fertility goddess, a sex goddess. So here we see more tie-in with the fleshly appetite. And then Edrei. Edrei here is Hebrew for strong. This is a very strong power, a very strong urge or attracting force. And he ruled in Mount Hermon. Hermon is Hebrew for band, or band for destruction. We've seen this word before in Joshua as well, band. And in Salcha, we're drawn to. Salcha, it said, was a place that had lots of wine and vineyards, and so it was an attractive place where you could satisfy your fleshly appetites. And in all of the Bashan, up to the border of the Geshuri and the Ma'akati. And these two are very, you could go deep here and connect these very much to sexual desire. Geshuri is joiners or bridgers, like coming together, right? And Ma'akati is squeezers or pressers. So there's this joining and pressing and squeezing of the flesh that is indicative or so related to these fleshly appetites. And then half of the Gilead, so the other half of the Gilead, bordering Sihon, king of Heshbon. So again, this is a resource that I've made for you guys, and you can have this on our website or link to it from the Thursday update. So Sihon and Og, comfort or fleshly appetite and human reasoning. These are two very, very important battles we must be waging in order to go in and easily defeat, or at least more easily defeat, 31 other kings. But these two had to come first in the campaign of the Israelites as they entered into the land. Moving on, verse 6. Moses, a servant of Adonai, and Bnei Israel defeated them, Sihon and Og. Then Moses, a servant of Adonai, gave it as a possession to the Reubenites, Gadites, and half-tribe of Manasseh. Now these are the kings of the land whom Joshua and Bnei Israel defeated beyond the Jordan westward, from Baal-Gad in the valley of Lebanon to Mount Halak that goes up to Seir. Joshua gave it to the tribes of Israel for possession according to their divisions. In the hill country, in the lowland, in the Arabah on the slopes, in the wilderness and in the Negev, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And here we have the list of the 31. And I'll mention here that how it's written, it'll say the king of Jericho, Echad, 1. The king of Ai, Echad, 1. Right? So it keeps repeating this. So I'll go through it now. The king of Jericho, 1. The king of Ai, which was near Bethel, 1. The king of Jerusalem, 1. The king of Hebron, 1. The king of Jarmut, 1. The king of Lachish, 1. The king of Eglon, 1. The king of Gezer, 1. The king of Debir, 1. The king of Geder, 1. The king of Hormah, 1. The king of Arad, 1. The king of Libnah, 1. The king of Adullam, 1. The king of Makkedah, 1. The king of Bethel won. The king of Tapua won. The king of Hefer won. The king of Aphek won. The king of Sharon won. The king of Madon won. The king of Hazor won. The king of Shimron Meron won. The king of Achshaph won. The king of Taanach won. The king of Megiddo won. The king of Kedesh won. The king of Yokneam in Carmel won. The king of Dor in the region of Dor won. The king of Goyim in the Gilgal won. The king of Tirzah won, for a total of 31 kings. And that's the chapter. So, but let's look at these verses 9 through 24 really briefly, and then we'll close. Traditionally, the pattern of this text, as it is written in the scrolls, is of bricks being stacked directly on top of each other. So brick, 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 and then off a next row or a next column of brick, 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 right? There's a space between the king of Libnah, space, Echad, right? Unlike an offset pattern of bricks, as you would see in any good brick mason's work, this pattern is much less stable. Offset bricks goes up, and there's a sharing of the load, right? And how the joinery works, the masonry and the, what's the stuff in between the bricks? Mortar, yes, the mortar, how the mortar is, it all makes it much more stable. Stacking bricks side by side and up and up and up and up and up makes it less stable. So you could say that this wall is much more easily to knock, it's easier to knock it down. The other instance of this pattern, incidentally, can be found in the book of Esther, of all places, which is a book we just recently celebrated last week. When Haman's 10 sons were mentioned, these are the sons that were hanged. The 10 sons who, in Esther chapter 9, verse 7, will never rise again from their downfall. So, again, this is traditionally how this is interpreted, where in the text we see it, how it's written out in columns, how it's considered like a wall, brick wall, and that it is a less stable wall than if the lines of text were overlapping, one on top of the other. Also, incidentally, and then we'll wrap up here, is that the number 31 is the numerical value of El. That's Aleph and Lamed. Aleph being a value of 1 and Lamed being a value of 30. So 31 is the numerical value of El, which is a shorthand, a nickname for God, right? Which is to say that the defeat of these 31 pagan kings is the equivalent of paganism being replaced by monotheism in God. So it's something interesting. All right, so before much of our battles can be won, before many of the strongholds can come down, two of the most important victories we can achieve with God's help through Yeshua are over our human reasoning and fleshly appetite. And again, when I say human reason, I don't say thinking. We must be thinking people. We must use our thoughts. We must use the brains God gave us to search and to find the patterns and the meanings in Scripture. But it's human reasoning and fleshly appetites that will keep us from our obedience and faith. When we allow faith and obedience to dominate, victory is ours. All right, this was a shorter teaching, so we'll just end it there for this week. Bless you all, and may He make us into the people He wants us to be. Shalom.